Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism. I'm your host, Adam, with my co-host, Mick Mulroy here. Today, we were going to talk about a topic that I think is starting to hit home for a lot of people, especially for me, which is burnout and a Stoic approach to burnout, and also just maybe some of our own general experiences. This is what I would probably classify as the more applied episodes that we tend to do, which as Mick and I have definitely tried to talk about on the podcast, is a major goal for us, is the use of this stuff every day. So, Mick, I was wondering if you, because we didn't actually talk about this episode very much before we started recording today, I was curious if you had any thoughts you wanted to start with.
Yes. This is, like you said, Adam, it applies to just about everybody around the world.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd start with a few framing facts, I guess. So I come from a country of which, on a positive side, strong work ethic is what it's known for. On a negative side, working nonstop is what it's known for. And when you travel around the world, people make reference to that.
Yeah.
Like they are shocked about how little time we have off. They're shocked about how long our days is. They're shocked about how we're cool with that,
Yeah.
And part of that is because that's the culture you come from, right? So you're cool with it because you're like, well, everybody else is. I come from a culture inside the culture, the military and the agency, very similar, where it's like a badge of honor to be the guy that works 16 hours a day, right? That does more than other people because they're staying up at night and getting up in the morning, bright and early. It's truly a balance. It's not reached, and every commander in the military sense, or chief in my sense, gets up there and says, I got to make it more balance life and work with his people, but then shows them what he really means, which is working nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's also I can say the right things, but I don't present the right things. So you get the real message, which is I still expect you to be working nonstop. So this is something I think is always going to be a balance. And I'd start with this. The first thing that anybody should do is to assess their situation.
Yeah.
And anything, right? But what I mean by assessment is you got to find out what you love to do. I mean, there's the old adage that, find out what you love to do and then you won't work a day in your life thing. I totally agree with that. You got to have a purpose. If you have a purpose, then you're willing to do just about anything to get to it. That's the definition of a purpose to me. It can be as dramatic as surviving a concentration camp, as we all know.
Viktor
Frankl, and that was his quote, or at least a paraphrase of his quote. And you also got to find your people. That's the other thing I'd say. There'll be a lot of P's. I'm going to go with a P theme today. But your people, man, and people means like your core friends, your posse. It means your partner in life, and then that will eventually account for who your people are. Right. So that's what I would always say an assessment is geared toward. Your purpose and your people. And once you find that, then it's going to be in a balance to keep those prioritized and internal to each other managed. And sometimes it really just comes down to managing. And it might sound pretty simplistic, but if you're like, okay, last month I had to take this work opportunity, so I was away from my family. This month, I'm going to skip something that I like to do with my friends to be with my family. Yeah. And then eventually you're going to have to go, hey man, I got to be a good friend, because that drops off, and it's not, and it shouldn't. um, I got to do more with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an either or. You have to produce, you have to be the provider, but you got to be a parent and you got to be a friend.
Yeah.
So I'll start with that because
Yeah.
it is going to be something. And quote by Marcus Aurelius that always comes to mind is, if you really do find what you love to do, you'll work yourself down, I think was his exact phrase, doing it. And that's a good thing, but it comes down to you to use that balance, which is another word for temperance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moderation, to
Yeah.
keep both concepts alive. But
Yeah.
what I
Totally.
mean, I know this was your idea for this, so there had to be something in your life
Well,
going on right now that.
I mean, yeah. I mean, for me, like I started a new job, and there's stress that comes with that. I mean, it's a fairly high ranking. I mean, like I don't work in the military or anything, but it's a fairly high ranking leadership position, and there's stress that comes with that, and there's time that comes with that, and also, you know, um, I think that's something that's really important to take into account. There's a responsibility that you have when you act like I'm a director, and there's a responsibility you have in a role like that, right? To provide, two things, right? Your own outputs, but also leadership as an output for others. And, and there's like many other things too, but if I were to break it down simply, I think that's how I'd put it. And so, it's not been rough or tougher. That's not what I'm trying to say, but it's definitely been very busy. And, I was experiencing some, it feels like fatigue, but really it's burnout symptoms, right?
Right.
And it was something where I thought, I think this is something that a lot of people will feel today, right? We are.
Well, what would you say are, just sorry to interrupt, but what
Go
would you
ahead.
say are burnout symptoms? Just so we can kind of
Yeah, I mean, so there's
level
the
it.
there's yeah, there's a great question though, because I think it manifests in everybody a little bit differently, but I think there are always some common factors, right? I mean, like, you know, for me, burnout in one way feels like fatigue, but it's like fatigue even after like I went to bed early and got up late and I am still wiped, right? That's a symptom of potential burnout, at least as
Hmm.
far as I'm concerned, because that's where like your body just, it's after a full night's sleep, you're still not able to feel yourself again. I think that's a starting symptom. I think as
Yeah,
well there are some sort
that's
of
a good point.
yeah, well, I think as well there's some intersocial interactions as well. For me, for certain, when I get really burned out, I start to go quite introverted. I start to pull away, and that doesn't mean that I push people away. It just means that I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to go to that thing. I'm not going to see that person, right? And I think that's one thing that comes up a lot for me personally. I'm what you would call an ambivert. I'm an introvert extrovert. I'm really 50-50. When I did the Myers-Briggs test, I ended up scoring like 51% extroverted or something like that. Like it was really, I didn't know this was a thing, but it's something people talk about today. Also, I don't really like things like that because it makes people think they're one thing, but I tend to be sort of both. And so I'll get really insular where I'm sort of at home. And the other thing is there's a sign that I've noticed. It's not exactly burnout. It's sort of like when you're feeling out of control with your own life. It's where one thing that people say is that you will sometimes not follow your normal routine. Like you'll stay up later watching mindless things or looking at your phone. It's a
Hmm.
subconscious way for your brain to make you feel like you are still in control, because you can be like, I don't have to go to bed right now. I could choose to go to bed later or whatever. And when I start to notice those ticks, right, it's like I go, oh,
Hmm.
okay. I'm reacting to this from the outside, this outside influence coming in, and that's how I do that. But I think in general as well, it's just like there's a feeling of disconnect because your brain is struggling to keep, your burning out is literally like your brain and your body is struggling to keep up with like the things that would normally feel regular, you know. So
And do
and
you
that
think burnout is, and again to level it again,
yeah, yeah.
do you think burnout is simply doing too much, or is it out of balance? Like it's just all of one thing, or both?
Yeah, I think that's a great question that we have to ask ourselves. To me, burnout is probably a mixture, but I think it can definitely be one or the other. Overextension, right, is one of those things where, like, if you like, I had a friend one time who got like sort of picked a fight with some other friends when we were moving a friend from one place to another, like they were moving
Mm-hmm.
houses, and they sort of picked a fight and got really ornery. And I'd never seen this person be like this before. And then it turned out that this was like their fourth straight weekend of moving a friend, and it was like you should have been able to say no, right?
Yeah.
So it's an
Yeah.
overextension of yourself, right? And
It's a
Donald
good
Robertson,
example.
yeah, I mean, and Donald Robertson kind of talks about this actually, in that was talking about a lot of people feel stress and anxiety when when they either feel totally not in control or they feel like they're not living up to something. And so when you make the promise to do 4 weeks of moving people's houses, right, for different friends, you're not living up to. You might feel like I'm not living up to this because I'm moving really slow, or you feel like you're totally out of control, like I haven't had my own weekend in 4 weeks, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
there's an overextension side of it, but I think there is a side of it that needs balance. Human beings, especially, like because we are a higher intelligent group of animals, right? It's very clear that we need more play and stimulation. Otherwise, we will sort of fall stagnant. We kind of know, we see that, right? I mean, there's a reason why some people live to 100 and some people live to 75, right? And I'm not picking on 75-year-olds, but it's that thing of like, you know, um, you know, my mother's mother-in-law, she played tennis until she was like 89,
Mm-hmm.
like every day. And it was that thing where you never really knew how old she was, right? And I think that's one of those things here is you have to balance it because so we're talking overextension, but you can also be doing fun things and that can also overextend you. It's really, I think, a balance thing. And so, that's one of those things for me. I want to talk quickly about your assessment thing though, because I think what I find very interesting is a lot of people say, I'm feeling burnout, but they don't seemingly take the action, I find a lot of the time. And I'd love to get your point of view on this because I remember a podcast. I've always remembered this podcast from Massimo Pigliucci when he was doing his daily podcast. It was about a 5-minute podcast back in the day. Well, back in the day, it's like 5 years ago. Feels like a long time ago now. But this topic kind of came up about what would a Stoic do if they were sick, or what if would a Stoic do if they were burnt out, right? And I remember finding it interesting because, the standards that you would hear from standard responses you would hear from a lot of people, especially like Broics, right, would be like, well, you tough it out, you stand on your own 2 feet, you get up, you're a man, right? But in reality, Massimo said, well, actually, a Stoic would take the Advil, he would take the pill, he would take the nap, he would take the time off work to get himself right again. Like Stoics we are looking for personal toughness and resilience, but at the same time, we also use objective evidence to say what's the right course of action here, right? Like if you have the flu, don't go to work. And that it was a very interesting concept to me because I think what some people need to kind of realize is that the assessment of yourself, like you said it, this is my opinion, and I'd really like your take on it. You were saying the first thing you need to do is you have to assess yourself. How am I feeling, right? But in many cases, I think a lot of people first have to get over the hurdle of doing the assessment. I don't know if
Yep.
you've ever thought about that way.
Yep.
Like, I work in engineering. I work in a field that's very parallel to yours, right? A lot of people from the military join the space agency afterwards, right? And the agency was built on essentially ex-military personnel, and it's the hustle culture, as they call it today, is really prevalent in that as well because it's a very important job we're doing. But I feel like you're not even allowed to ask the question, or people feel like you're not even allowed to ask the question of like, how am I doing? What's your take on that? Because that's something that I think a lot of people don't talk about, is even being able to say, am I okay?
Yeah. So when it comes to assessment, if you don't do it, nobody will. I mean, it's literally up to you, because if you have a job that you're a provider, and historically, obviously, men have that's been our prime purpose, is to
Yeah.
provide. Period. And that's good. I mean, it's a good thing to provide. Doesn't mean that only men can do it, obviously, but so it's
Right.
kind of it's ingrained in our head, and we all know that's true. Like if you're
Yeah.
not doing that, then you're missing the mark. Um, so I think you have to do your own assessment, because I am an introvert. So and it's important in the sense that people know this, not because you should be obsessed with what you are, but like the way you burn out is different than the way an extrovert burns out, or a person that's in the middle.
Right.
Right. Literally, extroverts, when they burn out, they want to be around people. Introverts is the opposite. So, like, it's when you're doing an assessment, there is, I guess, if you're looking at this, like, you've, identified an issue and you're kind of coming up with a solution, right?
Yeah.
The solutions are going to be different depending on what kind of the person you are.
Yes.
Right. So it is important in that regard that you identify what you lean toward. But you have to make that assessment, because if you love your job, they're going to see you love your job and they're going to want you around more.
Yeah.
Right. If they're a really good supervisor, he or she is going to tell you, don't you have a family? Why are you here all the time? But chances are they won't. So you do. You have to do it. And you have to be fair. You have to be fair, right? If you might be, well, I think you're probably old enough to remember. You remember Jim Croce's Cats in the Cradle?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know what the song's about, it's literally about this father who keeps telling his kid that he's going to spend more time with him, and then at the end it flips, where the son is telling the elderly father, he wish, later I'll spend more time with you. It's a pretty impactful song, right? I mean, songs are usually about people breaking up or something, but that was it's a pretty meaningful song. And if you haven't listened to it, I think it's been covered a couple times and redone. So don't be that guy. Don't be that guy.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if we had a whole series on parenting.
We did.
First thing about parenting is you got to show up.
Yeah. You got to show up.
I remember I had a friend who, his father was a professional basketball player, but he never met him. Right. But he was an exceptional athlete.
Yeah.
Where you could just tell, like, okay, he was track star, football star, basketball star. Mm-hmm. And there's another guy that was on I was playing basketball in high school. Another guy that was on our team who, he wasn't physically great, but he was just as good.
Oh, right.
Because his dad was the coach.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? And his dad wasn't a professional basketball player. His dad was a short, kind of chubby guy, right?
Yeah.
And I remember my other friend, who's since deceased, saying, we're just as good. I had the physicality, but he actually had a dad.
Right.
So, think about that. Right.
Well, yeah. And I think when you look at this idea of providing, right? So think about it in two different ways. In some ways I'm talking to our listeners, but think about it in two different ways: providing as a parent, we'll say, or providing as a leader in a workforce, right? The part of the assessment, I think, has to be not just it is not just what am I providing, it's how am I providing it, and am I providing it well? The interesting thing about providing, right? And it was interesting because you and I were talking about this a little bit. The interesting thing about providing is a lot of people tie that straight to financial provision, and I'm not saying that's not important. In our day to day, we need money. But I think there's a question you always also have to ask, which is, am I providing the other things that I should be providing as a parent, which is, like you said, presence, guidance, example, stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if you are being honest with yourself and taking this assessment and saying, am I doing this well? How am I doing? How am I feeling? Right? You have to also ask yourself, am I doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing? And I think that that's part of this, right? Is first you have to get over the hurdle of you have to allow yourself to do the assessment. Because I know people that do the hustle mentality, and they're like, it doesn't matter. I don't need to ask that question because nobody's going to do it for me, and I have to do this on my own, and I'm blah 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 blah. It's like, yeah, but if your hustle culture generates crappy output, then it doesn't matter how hard you work, right? But at the same time, it's asking that question of is the output that I'm doing the right output? Is it good output? What's the quality of that output? I think that's an easy way to use it as a measure for how you're feeling anyways, right? So I definitely know that there are times where, you're doing the weekly meeting and you're just talking to your staff and you're just like, man, I'm flat today. I'm not feeling this right now. But I don't have kids, so parenting is not usually an example that comes up easily with me because I don't have kids of my own. But I think that's part of this whole thing, allowing yourself even to feel like you're allowed to ask, "Am I feeling okay?" It feels like a hurdle we're struggling with, at least in North America right now.
And then the other thing I'd add to, if we're after, so the you assess, you balance. That's what we're talking about now. Is find what you really like to do.
Yeah,
What is it that you like to do?
yeah,
I don't. For example, what are my hobbies? Stoicism is probably the major hobby, right? And I like to hike and trail run.
hmm
I used to like to box,
right.
but I don't do that anymore. Although I'd love to go back to coaching boxing because I did that too. Um, but you got to find what you like, not what you think other people like. I don't know how many times I've talked to business persons who play golf all the time and don't like it. I know a lot of people like it. I'm not dissing golf. I'm not dissing golf at all. I don't play, but obviously I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah,
But it's a joke. You start laughing because he's like, "Don't you play like every weekend?"
yeah,
And they're like,
yeah,
"Yeah,
yeah,
because that's what you do, man. That's what dudes do." And it's
yeah,
like I don't even like it. And so
yeah.
it's, and again, I'm not picking on golf. Not that
No,
I care if golfers get mad at me, but the
big
point
golf
being,
is mad at
so
Mick.
yeah, yeah. I don't, if they are, then we know people are listening to our podcast, which is great. Um,
Yeah,
but you get my point. It's just an easy one because it's so associated with work
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I was
It's
told,
good.
when I first, before I went back the warrior way, I was like, if I was going to be a lawyer, they were like, "Hey, man, you got to join a country club and you got to
Mhm.
learn how to play golf." I was like, oh. I've always just viewed it as like the uber rich sport. So my
Yeah.
dad was very much like a blue collar,
hmm
comes from that background,
Yeah.
Irish American kind of. So the rich sports weren't his. He liked the
Yeah.
pugilistic baseball and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
And I think,
I'm digressing. You get my
no,
point.
but yeah, I do get your point, right? And I should say I played 4 years of varsity golf in high school because it kept me from having to go to gym class. So I was a sub 30 handicap, and I still hate golf to this day. It's a personal thing. It's a personal thing. I'm not saying it's terrible. I don't like golf. I actually have to play soon because I have some friends who like it's. I think the only way I'm ever going to see them this year is if I play golf with them because they play a lot of golf, and that's okay. But ultimately, I think, talking about this from the perspective of hobbies and balance, I think maybe that's an important way for this to go, right? Like, it's really important to make sure that we decide on after you do the assessment that you decide on what's good for you. I think that's really an important thing here. My hobbies, right? I cross country ski both in the summer and the
Yeah,
winter, so I'm a roller skier and a winter cross country skier. And I have other. I like to hike, and canoeing was sort of a newer thing that's come back into my life and things like that. But
yeah, canoeing would be good.
yeah, for sure. Being on the water, I mean, I definitely the last couple of years I've been doing that more, and that's been really exciting. But I think the thing people have to remember is that these are things that rejuvenate you, right?
Yeah,
I like the
it's a
analogy
personal thing. That's what
yeah,
I'm
it's a
saying.
personal thing.
It's
Yeah,
not.
I like the analogy
Yeah.
of a bank account or a battery, right? It's like there are
Mhm.
things that deplete it and there are things that fill it up, right? And you need to find the right balance so that maybe I actually think the right balance is not where you break even. I think the right balance is where your battery or bank account's being filled. Do you know what I mean? Like I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
right,
yeah,
maybe
totally.
slowly, but being filled. And we have to ask that question. It's really funny to me, right? Because a lot of people still do the whole like, well, do you live to work or work to live? And I'm like, I'm neither actually. This is my personal philosophy around it.
Hmm.
Of course, because I'm odd, I'm always the different one. The way I answer that question is I live to do good work, and then at the end of it I want to go home and do something else, right? I know,
Hmm.
because I know that for me that's how it works is I want to know I do really good work and I try really hard, but I've also been able to do this assessment that you were talking about and know that I don't do well with an 80-hour week repeatedly. I just don't. And it is detrimental to my work and my team and my company and my agency and my program, whatever. um, when I don't take into account the fact that I really want to do good work at work, but I have to shut off the laptop at some point. and fit
Mm-hmm.
that in, right? And I want to do a shout out to Ryan quickly, Ryan Holiday quickly, because there's in engineering. Just go with me on this 1 second. In engineering, there's this thing they call the iron triangle, right? Which is good, fast, cheap. You only get two. It's either good and
Mm-hmm.
fast. It's made good and fast. It's not cheap. It's either good and cheap.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Then it's the
Yeah.
right. And so, well, good and cheap doesn't really exist, to be frank. But there's another iron triangle. I can't remember what he calls it, but Ryan has a triangle which is uh, family, work, scene like SCENE. So it's like family, work, and then scene is like knowing the latest hip movie and pop star and whatever, right? And Ryan had talked about it. It sounded like you only kind of get two, right? And I'm actually not disagreeing with that, but I think it's more like, for me, that triangle is probably more like work, family, and then the other one is like personal, like what you need. Maybe you have to find the right balance between those three, where you can do those things for yourself to rejuvenate yourself, where you can still be providing for work and still be providing for your family in the ways of more than just with money.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion. But what's your take on that? Because it's I don't think I've ever spoken about this triangle to you before.
I think it really does come down to the balance that we're talking about. So the way I would add to that is that every so often, to go with my P theme today, you got to purge.
Yeah.
You got to purge stuff, right? You can be half-assed at everything. Seriously.
Yeah.
Most people can't be great at everything, and nor would they have time to. So you have to purge. So you have to like go through and say, okay, that's why I was saying your purpose and your people. You got to figure out who your people are. You can't be friends to everybody, or
Yeah.
you be bad friends to everybody.
Right.
So, and it's not you just have to pick. You're really going to have to pick. Like, these are my people, and what I include people I always have is obviously family,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the family you choose, right? So it's
Yeah.
your friends can be, and nowadays, especially in now modern society, your friends can be closer than many people that are actually in your family, and that's just
Yeah.
what it is. Just
Yeah.
it, right? You don't have to make it. You don't have to apologize for it. And then obviously the people you're actually responsible for, which is your kids, but they're part of your tribe, so to speak. I think you
Yeah.
got to pick your tribe, to be frank, and then really focus on them. And then it's not that you're rude to other people. You shouldn't be that. Period. I mean,
No.
you're
No.
stoic. If you're listening to this, you're stoic, and we don't do that, or we're not supposed to. But you can't like answer everything on social media. You can't meet everybody for coffee. You can't you can't do that and be fair to the people that you've chosen to be your posse. You see
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's work. It's a near constant thing. You have to be, really said in meditations too. I think it's a very used quote is don't be all about business, right? You
Yeah.
gotta be present for your whole life.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that, for the younger folks in the audience, um, you're, you retire one day. I'm retired. I mean, I still work every day, but
Yeah.
but just so everybody gets it, like your primary occupation, wherever it is, one day you're going to walk out of there and you're going to be
Yeah.
replaced immediately. Don't get offended by it. Don't get offended by it. That's how
No.
society works. You don't want society to fall apart just because you decided to move to,
Right. Right.
the mountains of Montana. It is good. So you need to set up the next generation for success,
Yeah.
and then be very comfortable with the fact that you did the best you could. You rode hard, and now you're not. And you'll
Yeah.
find out that in a good way, you'll be replaced, and you'll want to know that you balanced it your whole life, and you'll find out that's your report card day.
Yeah.
That's your report card day when you retire.
Yeah. I
Who
think.
reaches out to you and who doesn't?
Oh
Who do
yeah.
you know? What do you do? That's your report card day on whether you passed the B part of the balance test.
Oh, totally. And I mean, there's that joke you'll see in, I can't remember if it was a meme or where I saw it, but where it's like, somebody's gravestone, right? It's like, I wish I went to more meetings. I don't know that anybody will ever say that, right?
Right.
And I'm trying to get out of meetings. No,
Yeah.
but it is that interesting kind of kind of situation where people are losing sight of the bigger picture, I think, for the small thing that's in front of you. And that's pretty common, I think, especially like in hustle culture. It's always, people will sort of, it feels like people will wear this badge of honor. It's like, this thing went wrong and I dropped everything and fixed it in 5 minutes. And it's like, well, what happened to everything else? Right. And,
Mhm.
I think that's part of this whole thing. I get to this point sometimes with the burnout stuff too, where I try to remind myself many things that I wonder if you've ever thought about this since leaving the service, for example, which is like, I am not a fighter pilot. I am not an ambulance driver. I am not in combat. Like, I don't have to make these split second decisions, and I don't have to put myself in a position where I have to make these things happen in the next 30 seconds. And therefore, I have to drop everything all the time and take on all that stress. And I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that like we are not in these split decisions a lot of the time. Now, you and I both know we have lots of members of the military who listen to us, and I don't want to discount their experience because they have those experiences, right? But I think what I'm really trying to say is people have to understand the context of where they are. And make sure that they understand what needs to be done now. What do I need to do now, and what do I need to do now for myself so that I can support this in the future. And I think that's kind of what it is. I like being living in a big city and driving around, right? Like people will honk at you like at as soon as the light turns green, like
Yeah,
literally.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm
Even in
like,
Canada, really?
I yes, okay.
What?
Remember, Canadians are really nice until we're not. But you're right, it is a thing. In fact, it happened to us yesterday, and I was just like, we were in this little town. I was visiting some family out of town, and we were in this little tiny town of like maybe 100,000 people at most, right? Or sorry, that is a city, but it's like it was a small town feel. And
Mhm.
someone honked. It's like Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. This person's honking, and I'm going, all right. And they were really laying on it, and I was just like, okay,
Really?
where are you going? Like where, like if you do need to get somewhere, I don't know everybody's experience, and I hate to be judgmental about that, but at some point you're just like, well, it's not an unmarked police car, it's not a police car, it's not an ambulance, you're not a fighter pilot, you're not an astronaut on the ISS, right? You just don't, you're taking on a lot of stress for no reason, right? And I think that's part of the assessment thing too. It's like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
am I in the right mindset for here, right? If I take the blinders off for 3 seconds and look around, like I have a home, I have food in the fridge, I have the books that I love, I have a cat that I rescued, I have family that cares about me, I have friends that I love to talk to. And, you do kind of go, I probably don't have to freak out about this, not to, office space, office space, my TPS
Mhm.
report, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, that is a
That
great
just does
movie.
but it just doesn't really, you know what I mean? But and in fact, we're kind of talking about this, right? It's like so many people take on this hustle culture, and there are things you
Yeah.
do have to hustle with sometimes. But there's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hustling to get it done, and there's hustling like I'm up till 5:30 every morning for 5 weeks to get this thing done, and we've all had the deflating. Anybody, a lot of people in the private sector have that deflating thing where you then deliver that thing, and someone's like, "Great,
Here's your next thing.
yeah, exactly."
Yeah. Hey, and like, look, I come from the culture, and I think there's a lot of benefits from people who work really hard and have that like work ethic. I'm a big proponent of instilling a work ethic in
Totally,
young people. So, I mean, this is about
totally.
balancing it, because if you don't, you won't make it to the end of the race. Think of it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, yeah,
Really won't make it to the end of the race. You're going to burn out. This is what the
yeah,
whole episode's about, is not burning out. Sometimes you got to.
yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I'm sure it happens in the space program, but if you're
Mhm.
in the military, for example, and you go to war, well,
Yeah,
it's all hands on deck, literally, right? So
yeah.
I was just looking over my shoulder. For those that are watching on YouTube or something, I'm in a different room because my friends are coming to go to the concert that if you walked a mile through that woods,
You'd
you'd
be
get
right
to.
in front
It's
of
on
us.
a ranch. It's on a ranch that way. Anyway, so I had to move rooms because we want to give them the bison room. But I just noticed this is one of my dogs are like celebrities in the Mulroy household. So this is Sarge, is one of our dogs we had a long time ago. He's half pit bull, half German Shepherd. So
Mhm.
super. But I was gone so often that I barely knew Sarge. They got him when I was on deployment. Literally, I was talking to my wife and she was like, I'm trying to get the dog to stop barking. I'm like, what? And then she's like, oh, he's scratching a hole in the floor. I was like, what floor? He said hardwood floor. And I said,
I thought you were going to say, like, we have a dog.
and I was like, we got a hardwood floor? She goes, yeah, I got a hardwood floor. And I said, whose dog is it? She goes, oh, it's ours. Like, we got a dog, which was great. But anyway, so when I came home, and this is just a short story, but I think it illustrates like when you realize, well, I'm going upstairs and my kids stayed. It's kind of like you go up to a loft and their bedrooms on both sides. And I didn't know this, but Sarge would sleep in one or the other room, and then usually would come to the top of the stairs just to stay there, right, to guard him.
Sure.
German Shepherd, right? So if you ever want a dog that'll guard your kids forever, nonstop. So I'm walking up to see him because I got home late. I'd been gone for like 5 months.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I run up the stairs, not thinking, hey, there's a dog in here now. And this dog launches. Like it launched. Like it was coming out like my throat. Right. Wow. So he hit me. We rolled down the stairs. Mary Beth comes out. She's like, oh, that's Pop. And the dog's like, that ain't Pop. I don't know this dude. Like he's going down. So then he realized, the relationship thing. And I don't know, maybe they can smell your scent on the kids and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, I was like, I'm going to make this dog my buddy, because I was pissed at first, but then I was like, this dog has been playing my role. Yeah. For the last 5 months. Right. It makes you think about it. So, obviously if you listen to the podcast, you know what I think about dogs. So we became the besties, and Sarge traveled with us all around the world. But the point being is it does wake you up. It does wake you up that you can't just do one thing and have a balanced life. Yeah. You can't just expect others to make up for you. You got to be there. You got to do the thing that makes you the dad or the partner in work, or partner in life. Yeah. Right?
Totally. And I want to tell a story from the space program that's kind of famous, but I think is important to talk about here, because so many people, especially with the current, the real hype around the space program, with Artemis 2 going really well and Artemis 3 team is announced and all that. And I'm so excited for all of that. Everybody is.
Me too.
But there's a famous story about a place called Skylab, which you probably know what that is. It's a American space station that was launched just after the Apollo program, and it was an extension of the Apollo program's hardware. So it used Saturn rocket technology. And there's a very famous incident where people call it a mutiny, and I don't use that terminology because it's not what it was. But essentially, the crew of 3 on Skylab were getting so overworked, and were having so many tasks assigned to them from the flight plan, in addition to the existing flight plan, which is a pretty packed schedule anyways, that they essentially at some point said, we're not doing the flight plan this morning. And one of the astronauts, for example, said he said, for the next hour, I'm going to look out of the window on the side of this space station, and I'm going to look out at the Earth. He said, because I barely looked out this window. We are so busy, because they were doing spacewalks and science experiments and maintenance and reporting and and yada yada. And you're going, okay, so that sounds like a lot, right? And very famously, right, these people did this. Now, yes, I don't remember. I don't think any of those astronauts ever flew again, but they may have. I don't know the story about that off the top of my head right now. But what I want to say is very important, and why I believe the space program does this actually very well, is that in the flight plans you get today, the lesson learned from that was that you cannot overload your crew, right? Yeah. Yep. And they are in a safety critical situation all the time, right? Like you get a leak on the station, you have to get in the Apollo module and come back, right? There are split second decisions that will occur, and you cannot push your people to the point of breaking like that. And so what NASA will do, and I try to do this myself, I'll explain how I do it in a second, but what NASA will do is build in the break periods. Like, yes, they have workouts because they have to do that to maintain muscle mass and bone density. Totally. Yes. Yeah. But it's also part of they're not working. They're doing something else. They're not dealing with 5,000 technical problems and flip this switch and do this thing and everything. And NASA has that built into the process, right? In fact, if you ever watch a spacewalk,
Yeah.
right, and they're all on YouTube, and there was a very famous one that just happened recently where they replaced the entire wrist cluster on Canadarm2. Totally recommend watching that. It's incredibly. I actually haven't seen the spacewalk yet because I was out of town, but it's an incredibly interesting situation because, like, you're essentially repairing a robot in space that's
Mm-hmm.
25 years old, right? Anyways, but if you watch spacewalks, like they literally wait and they build in time. Like, we're not going to rush you. We're not going to push you. Like, where are you? Tell us where you are on the checklist, right? And there are breaks built in when they're doing that, right? And there
So
are
is it
breaks.
like a coach relationship, a coach player relationship? Is that how like command at NASA is with the astronauts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the back in the
That's what I
day,
would
right?
assume. But
Yeah, it is kind of like that. So ground control, mission control in Houston, for example, right? Or if that might tie in somebody else if they're using somebody else's tech or whatever. But what they do is they're talking instructions to the astronauts. The astronauts know the mission plan, right? And they have a flip book on their arm, right? And they're looking at stuff there too. But ultimately, they're getting instructions as they're going. And so it's a very symbiotic relationship between the ground controller and the astronaut, and they're taking instructions. And the astronaut, one of the interesting things that their astronauts are trained on is you have to tell us everything. It's like putting my foot in the restraint. Yeah, restraint sticking a bit because they want to know exactly what's
oh,
happening.
right,
They need
yeah,
to know if you
that's
have to,
interesting.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And what they do a lot of the time in the space program, like, because a lot of people know about the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, which is this huge pool in Johnson Space Center in Houston, and it's like so big that they can put a mock-up of like the International Space Station, a 1-to-1 scale mock-up of it inside the pool, and then you do spacewalks in it for neutral buoyancy, so it feels like you're weightless. Well, sort of. And when they're doing that, they're talking to a ground controller who's up outside the pool, and they're going, okay, tell me what you're seeing, right? And what are you doing? And it's like, oh, I got to do this, and I'm moving my hand here, and this bolt's sticking a bit. I got to add a little more torque. Okay, well, don't exceed the 15, Newton meters or whatever it is, right? And so it's this very symbiotic relationship, but it is built into that kind of thing where they do have to build in breakpoints because also, like, 8 straight hours. Spacewalks are very tough. They're very physical because every time you move, your body is moving around because of Newtonian physics. And
Mm-hmm.
so what they end up doing is what they call HITL testing, human in the loop testing, where you have to factor in that a human is doing this, and they
Mm-hmm.
will need a break, and they can't torque 25 bolts in a row. Their arm's going to fall off, right?
Right, right.
So they
Yep.
build that into that. So that's a very extreme example, and I really urge people to, like, understand this kind of thing because I literally took that as a lesson when I started to burn out the first time I joined the space program, and I started building in time in my schedule just to do my own thing that I needed to do. And it sounds crazy simple, but, like, literally, if you look at my calendar, my whole day will be blocked, for example. But I might only have 4 meetings, but I have blocks on there that just say busy, or it might have an output like write this report, review
Mm-hmm.
this output from this. And it gives me the ability to be a better leader because I have time to do my own work, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a weird thing to say, but it's true. But also B,
Yep.
it gives me time where I'm extracted from the situations where people are pulling on me all the time. Like, how do I do this? What's my next task? Da, 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 da. And there's a secondary thing to that too, where by me separating myself, it makes people feel empowered to sort it out themselves too. But the lesson I want people to take away from it, right, is that it is not a bad thing to schedule in your recovery periods. It's not a bad thing to schedule in your time if it makes you better, if it makes
Yes.
you improve, right? Burnout is something that is not just because you've been, there's very severe burnout that you and I both know of, right? Where it's like you probably had night marches with a 60-pound pack for days, and
Yeah.
I, I,
Physical. There's physical, but the mental one is the toughest.
yeah, the mental one is
Yeah.
the toughest, right? It's like that thing where you're fighting an enemy that never tires, never sleeps, never eats or drinks, never goes to the bathroom. And the problem is it never goes away, and it's there even when you're sleeping. So that I think the thing I really wanted to talk about this part of it is that I really want people to take away. It's okay to tell somebody to set a boundary and tell somebody, like,
Yep.
I'm taking 20 minutes for lunch. I hope it's more than 20 minutes, but sometimes that's what I have to do. But I'm saying I'm going to step away. I'll be back at
Yep.
this time.
Yep.
and that's okay. And I think
It
people
is.
have to be okay with
That's the
that.
last thing. You got to control it. So after you
Yes.
assess, you balance, and you control it. And it's
Yeah.
different. When you do the balance, you're doing your own planning. But controlling means you can't slip back into what you were trying to avoid, which is what
Exactly.
you're talking about. Block your schedule off, take that vacation,
Yes.
practice what you preach.
Yep.
I don't ever take vacation, so I obviously don't do that. But yes,
You
I
have
agree
time
with
that
you.
you set aside to talk to me for this. Like
I
you and I
do.
both.
Yeah. Yeah.
This in some way is a part of a therapy for us, right? So
Yeah, this is my hobby. I have
yeah.
a lot of friends. Most of their hobbies is hunting, which I don't have a problem with. I'll go with them. But
Yeah.
this is my hobby. Right? It always has been.
Yeah. And I think
But
those are
anyway,
great things people take away.
that was really interesting. I like when you bring in the space program because I'm a geek.
I try.
Not a geek, but a space geek.
Yeah.
I'm
But we're
fascinated by it. But
yeah.
that's to think about. That would be one of those. What I'm thinking about, like one of those few situations where you have all these people that are focused on such a small group of people in everything they do,
Yes.
and it would seem like it'd be a very easy to overtask them because so many people want them to do
Overtasking.
their thing, right?
NASA really invented the term overtasking, really. They
Yeah.
were the ones who identified it because they had astronauts who were struggling to move around outside because they were so exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So
Anyway,
anyways, we should wrap up and for today, just because of timing and everything. But I really enjoyed today's conversation. I appreciate you letting me bring that on as a walk on for this week because it's something that I think is very important today more than ever because of so many things that are happening. But for those of you out there, service people, people in the private sector, people in the space program, anybody who's listening, we want to say we hear you on Burnout. We'd love to hear from you. So info@pubandporch.com or leave us a comment. Like and subscribe, all the fun things from a podcast. But until the next one, cheers, Mick.
Sláinte, Adam. Thank you for listening to the Pup and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pupandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pupandporch.com. Until next time, Pup and Porch out.
Today's music is provided by Heath Cantu from epidemicsound.com.